present to honorable members the agenda for adoption. I think the main agenda item will be the briefing by the Minister on the revised 2020-21 budget vote, strategic plan, and annual performance plans. I think we would actually then go to discussion on those issues, and then we actually can proceed and pick up on the other issues which are listed. We would actually then get to the next point of the committee business, the second and the third quarter program. There's actually an adjustment which I'd like to make on the NLC, the issue relating to their opinion, because I thought by the time of the meeting I would be having a feedback. There was some communication with some members around that issue. So the request was to just say on the next committee meeting, we will actually have a scheduled item, because the issue of further consultation by the legal team with the NLC, I thought I would have feedback by our meeting today. So I think that's the only adjustment. One will actually put it for our next committee, and there will be actually a full presentation and engagement and the way forward around that issue. So that's the only adjustment I'd like to put forward to members, and maybe on the other issues, present before you the agenda for adoption. Honorable members, the agenda before
Chair,
you. Good morning.
Mr. Cuthbert's hand is up, Chair.
Cuthbert?
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'd like to address you on the NLC matter. Chairperson,
It's been removed from the agenda.
Chair, but we haven't adopted the agenda yet, so I'm sure I'm allowed to address it before the agenda is adopted.
Oh, okay. Let me hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, we have, as the DA, sought a legal opinion on the conduct of the NLC, and our legal opinion has found that the NLC has acted unlawfully by failing to disclose 2018, 2019, and 2019, 2020 proactive grant beneficiaries, as well as the failure to release the COVID-19 relief fund, beneficiaries. And Chairperson, in light of that, we will be distributing that legal opinion to yourself. And what we will be doing is we will be laying criminal charges against the NLC for failing to fulfill their duties in the public interest and to provide transparency as necessary, following which we are going to be writing through our Chief Whip to the Speaker to report your act, or shall I say your participation in this matter by preventing us from discussing this. It took us 1.5 days to solicit a legal opinion, and I can't seem to understand why it has taken 28 days for yourself to solicit that legal opinion. Furthermore, Chairperson, we will also be writing to the Speaker regarding the conduct of Parliament's legal advisor, because we do think that a reasonable time was not met by virtue of them seeking that legal opinion. Chairperson, I cannot believe that in this day and age, post-state capture, we are trying to skirt around issues and not allow for transparency to take place. There have been a number of allegations of corruption during the COVID-19 pandemic, and it's important that we have transparency and that the public know how their money is being spent. And I think in that regard, you have abrogated your duties and you have failed the public of South Africa. I had a lot of respect for you as the Mayor of Ekurhuleni, and I think you did a sterling job there, but I'm very disappointed to see the way in which you've conducted yourself here. And as stated earlier, we'll be taking the aforementioned action.
What do you call that? Honorable Cuthbert, what do you call the statement you're making now? Because I was actually saying we will talk on the issue on the next committee meeting.
I'm addressing you on the matter, Chairperson.
What do you call?
You have failed to provide a legal opinion. Okay, so I've gone and sought my own. And on top of that, Chairperson, I believe that this is a stalling tactic to move it to meeting. And there are members of the Portfolio Committee that continuously say, why do we bring up the NLC issue? Well, if it was addressed in the first place and we were provided with the requisite information we have requested, then we wouldn't need to discuss it any further. And I think that is the democratic principle that we are arguing on the basis of.
Can I actually ask that we note your statement? And I'm sure I won't actually get into a debate in terms of what you say as a party. But can I then ask that we look at the agenda for adoption? We actually then
Sorry,
pick up on.
I had my hand up. I have a question about the agenda. It's Dean.
Dean,
Can I go ahead?
let me hear you about the agenda.
Yeah, I just want to understand. In the last meeting, you gave a commitment that we would be dealing with the NLC issue in this meeting that has been unilaterally removed from the agenda. Let me finish, please. Let me finish. No, let me finish. I want to know why it has been removed from the agenda and who took that decision, because I want to motivate that it must be put back on the agenda.
Can we actually then do this?
I'm dealing with the agenda.
McPherson, your colleague has spoken to that issue, and I'm sure on my part.
Duma, you can't tell me what I can and can't talk to about the agenda. So, Duma, I would like to know about the agenda. Whose decision was it to unilaterally remove the NLC issue from this agenda? Please tell me who took the decision.
McPherson, Mbuyane, I noted you. If you can actually then come in, can I just say the item is on the agenda? It's on the agenda now as proposed, and I actually did say, can I actually have it removed, because the feedback I was supposed to receive before our meeting from the legal division of Parliament, I haven't actually received that. And I'm sure we can be able.
You don't have
I haven't received that yet.
28 days later.
McPherson?
Ridiculous.
I've got it in a day and a half.
Can I ask Mbuyane, you wanted to say something, McPherson and Cuthbert? Can you be quiet? Then let's hear let's actually hear Mbuyane about the agenda.
Mbuyane. Thank you very much for the opportunity. Chairperson, I raised my hand to adopt the agenda with the changes that you have proposed, to say we are not ready in terms of a specific issue. Then that is why I'm raising to adopt the proposal to adopt the agenda, Chairperson. Chairperson, can I be protected, Chairperson?
Continue, Mbuyane.
No one ever removed any item. All the items are on the agenda. Now you are saying, as the chair of this committee, this issue are not ready. Then I'm seconding that issue can be removed. Then we continue with the agenda. That is what, no one has removed anything. The agenda is still as it is. Just that we are raising that you are not ready in terms of the report. So we cannot have an item, you cannot have a report on it. So I that you adopt the agenda, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's actually then check if
Chair, Ms. Montashe, Chair.
There's Montashe.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chair, I am worried when the personality of the chairperson of this committee is attacked. But Chair, I rise to second Honorable Mbuyane to say we support the adoption of the agenda with the amendment that the person has to do, because you give reasons that you are not ready with what you expected from the legal team, and that is beyond your control. We will not stand you being attacked in front of us, Mr. Chairperson. Thank you.
Okay.
And we continue the meeting, please. Thank you.
Can we then get, if ever there's anyone who objects on the adoption of the agenda?
I would like to amend the agenda.
Can you any objection? The agenda is moved and seconded. Any objection on the agenda with that amendment?
I would like to object, and then I'd like to call for a vote, please.
Vote on what?
I want to vote on the agenda being adopted.
Chair.
Listen, you move, you second, you object.
And then you vote.
Object?
Chair, if I may come in, Chair.
Okay, Andre.
Chair, if we cannot vote if Mr. McPherson wants to propose an amendment to the agenda, he must propose so he must have a seconder. Then we have two options in front of us. Currently, we only have one.
And then we
So
vote.
if Mr. McPherson wishes to propose an amendment to the agenda, which must be considered by the committee, he should do so and have a seconder for that. Then we can vote on two different agendas, Chair.
I would then like to propose an amendment to the agenda that the debacle, fiasco, and embarrassing way that this committee has dealt with the National Lotteries Commission and the non-legal opinion is put onto the agenda for us to discuss. I propose.
You say the agenda should have the NLC item and it must not be removed.
Correct.
Okay.
I
So
propose.
can we get a seconder for McPherson?
Chairperson.
Yes.
Chairperson,
Yes,
I would like to second this particular motion by my colleague, but I would just like to add that
Okay.
members of, no,
Can I
listen,
just say
Chair,
it's
you
on
can't
the
interrupt
agenda?
us each time
Second.
you are making a statement to the committee. I don't tell you what to say, so don't tell me what to say. I think that's
It's
a fair,
move-
that's a fair
we're asking for a seconder to the motion
Yes,
of
Chairperson.
of McPherson. Cuthbert, you are seconding him.
Yes, Chairperson, but I would
Yes.
like to make
And
my
then-
point. Chairperson,
No.
It's
Chairperson,
adoption of the agenda. It's adoption of
Chairperson.
the agenda. So
Chairperson.
what will be the discussion? You're actually moving this the objection of the agenda
Chairperson,
to
point of
include
order.
that. Okay,
Point of order, Chairperson.
let's hear.
Chairperson, my point of order is that I would like to clarify to other members
Can I
that.
just say it's adoption of the agenda, not point of
Can I
order.
finish before you interrupt me, Chairperson?
Let's
Do you
hear
mind?
you. I'm listening.
Chairperson, I would just like to remind other colleagues on the committee that you are aiding and abetting a certain unlegal action. So if you continue to prevent it, don't be surprised when the might of the law falls down on you because of your actions. So it's all fine and well to try and prevent this as much as you can. But the thing is that this issue is now out there. People are following this issue and people are going to be brought to justice. And I would like to remind colleagues of
Which
that.
item of the agenda are you speaking, Honorable?
McPherson,
On which agenda item are you speaking on? You don't come and bully us here.
Okay. Okay, Patasha, can I just say, Cuthbert, the issue you're raising is that you are just seconding McPherson for the agenda not to be adopted without NLC. Can I then check for those who actually vote for the adoption of the agenda with removal of NLC? We'll actually have to look at that. Secretary, because there are two motions. Yes.
We'll proceed on the first motion, Chair, to adopt the agenda with removal of the NLC. I will call each member's name and they have to indicate they will have to indicate they either agree or disagree, Chair. I'll call members by name, so we'll proceed. Those in favor of adopting the agenda without discussing the NLC opinion, Mr. Mbuyani?
I agree, Chairperson.
Mr. McPherson?
I vote against cover-up.
Mrs. Hermans?
I agree.
Ms. Mwatse?
I agree.
Mr. Thring? Mr. Thring?
Do not support.
Ms. Mantashe?
Chairperson, Andre, I agree with the proposal of the chair to put this matter on hold until he gets back the legal opinion. Therefore, I support that it be removed for now.
Thank you. Mr. Cuthbert?
Chair, I too vote against cover-up.
Mr. Mulder?
Chair, I vote against.
Ms. Yaku?
I choose to abstain, Chair.
Can I hear?
Chair?
Yaku?
I'm abstaining.
Okay. Abstain.
I will just Ms. Mutahung?
I agree.
Chair, we have Chair of the members, we have 5 members in favor of moving ahead with the adoption with the agenda, 3 members against, Chair, 4 members against, and 1 member abstaining. So the majority have it that we proceed with the meeting as moved, Chair.
Okay. Then can I just then ask that we then look at the adoption of the agenda as agreed to with the vote we have just taken? Can we actually go back to the agenda to pick up on the next item, which is actually the item which is the presentation by the minister? If you allow me to actually then welcome the minister, I'm sure there will be the department as well, and maybe for those who actually are joining the committee in terms of today's agenda. So can I actually invite the minister to speak to us, and I'm sure the minister and the department would be actually present to speak to us today. Can I invite minister?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to you, Chairperson, to all the honorable members, to the deputy ministers, to the officials of the DTIC, and to committee secretariat who are present today. And thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity to present the revised annual performance plan. Before I start with the serious business of introducing the topic, I want to wish our chairperson a happy birthday. I understand that on Monday he celebrated the coming onto earth of a young Duma Nkosi many moons ago. I am sworn to secrecy not to say how many years ago, but it is a not inconsiderable period. And I also want to wish Honorable Cuthbert offer my congratulations on the birth of his child and on becoming a father. I'm sure Honorable Cuthbert will join with us in recognizing the many sleepless nights, but the enormous joy that brings. Chairperson, I'd like to really introduce the item and then hand over to the Director General who will take the committee through the presentation itself. Honourable members will recall that I tabled the annual performance plan in Parliament in April this year, and it was based on work that had commenced in October last year already, right through to about February this year. And all of that work contained in that original annual performance plan was then based on government's thinking in the new administration. But when I tabled the annual performance plan, I indicated in the document, and I quote, that the annual performance plan may further be aligned to implementation of the national sector master plans and government's response to the COVID-19 pandemic, both during the period of the national disaster proclaimed by the President and thereafter as we adapt to the new economic reality. Should the adjustments be made, a revised plan will be submitted to Parliament. So that's what I had indicated at the time when I tabled the plan, Chairperson. The world and the country, as we all know, has changed since we started to draft the annual performance plan. COVID and its impact on the economy has been very substantial. The virus and the measures to contain and limit the damage it is causing to South Africans has had a very, very serious and significant impact on growth, on jobs, on the various programs of economic inclusion. And I should indicate, Chair, that it's our sense and it's the view of people across the world that this will continue, that we're not at the end of the period. Okay. Chairperson, it seems somebody is typing.
Chairperson, I think your mic must be muted, Chairperson.
Thank you.
It's muted.
Thank you very much. And so we are not out of the woods. The pandemic will continue to disrupt workplaces and affect consumer and investor confidence. We're already seeing, as the economy gets back to a much higher level of openness, that the transmission of the virus in the workplace is causing periodic shutdowns of workplaces and absence by groups of workers. In addition to the impact of COVID, we've also had budget cuts that flow from the impact of COVID and the need by government to direct resources more critically to fighting the pandemic, particularly health resources and support for vulnerable persons in our society and vulnerable firms. So we've had budget cuts, very significant, very substantial cuts. But Chairperson, crises are also moments when our resilience is tested and where we are all required to dig deep in our reserves of creativity, of goodwill, and that can-do South African spirit. And so using that as a framework, we reformulated the annual performance plan. The deputy ministers, Deputy Minister Gina, Deputy Minister Majola, and I met with the senior management of the department, led by the Director General, and we assessed the impact of the pandemic on the economy and the work that the DTIC has done and is continuing to do, I should say, and we looked at what the future holds. And during the course of these engagements, each program head in the 10 programs of the department, each program head was given a very specific brief. We asked them, how can you do more with the lower resources that's available to the department? And how can you refocus the work in the annual performance plan to deal more specifically with the challenges that the society now faces, be they economic reconstruction, the saving of jobs, greater support for companies. And what we've tabled in Parliament this week, and which is the subject of discussion today, is the reformulated annual performance plan. And it incorporates a number of changes. The reimagined industrial strategy outlined by President Ramaphosa in his State of the Nation address in June last year, the start of the 6th administration, was important then, but it's even more vital against the new challenges we face, and it will drive the work of the department over the medium term. The development of sector master plans will continue to play an important role in using the whole range of measures, cross-cutting measures we have available to reinvigorate key industries. And many of the programs will focus on opportunities to integrate delivery platforms, focus more on the growth potential to the rest of the African continent, and of course, learning the lessons of this period. We seek to build more resilient supply chains through greater levels of localization. We have circulated the new annual performance plan, and honorable members would have seen that it has a number of significant adjustments with a refocus within programs to respond to these new needs that I've spoken about. And it uses available policy tools to address our economic challenges, but also, much as there are these challenges, there are also opportunities, and it's to utilize the opportunities that there are. Of course, we are presenting an annual performance plan where for the DTIC as a whole, we've had a 16% reduction in budget, which is a very significant and deep cut in the available resource. Now, typically, when you've had a 16% reduction in resources, you ought prudently to cut your outputs, cut the number of indicators, and lower your ambition. But we can't do that in circumstances where so many firms and workers, the unemployed, consumers, many South Africans are under enormous pressure. And so what we've said is, even though we are cutting the budget resources, we will need to increase the number of outputs measured by the indicators, the key performance indicators that are contained in the annual performance plan. And in fact, honorable members, we have increased the number of indicators against what we put up a few months ago. We've increased it by some 17%, even though, as I've indicated, the resources have dropped. And I indicate this, and I wanted to bring that to the attention of the committee, because we must take the tougher road now, which is to do more with even less. And I ask for understanding by the committee when we hit challenges, as we no doubt will. But I did not want to, and the deputy ministers and the DG did not want to take the easier road of saying, well, if our budgets are cut, let's just across the board cut the outputs and the key performance indicators that we have, because we recognize that many South Africans are looking to the public sector, to government, to do our bit to help reinvigorate the economy, to limit the damage over this period, and to try to ensure that we achieve our national development goals. I want to illustrate what honorable members will have received as the presentation. It's a very detailed presentation. The Director General will take the committee through that detailed presentation. But I want to illustrate the new approach by looking at 4 challenges that we identified. The first challenge was a resource challenge, less resources available to us. The second one was a challenge of protecting industrial capacity in South Africa, because this is the great shakeout globally in economies. The third one is to, even in these difficult circumstances, identify opportunities to grow. And the final one was ensuring that we don't reduce or abandon our goal of inclusivity, economic inclusivity, and support for vulnerable persons in the economy. So these are then the 4 areas that I want to illustrate, and the DG will take the committee through the detail of it. So on the first of these 4 that I've mentioned, which is the resourcing challenges, a cut in budget, how do we deal with that cut in budget? So the first thing that we've done is in program 1, the program management has put forward a objective that they will use this period to see how we can create shared service platforms, a common back office that can be available between the department and some of the agencies, so that we cut the overhead costs, the unnecessary duplication of services within the DTIC entities as a whole, and to focus on and speed up the work on the integration, the second phase of integration between the old DTI and the old Economic Development Department, EDD, so that we in fact identify opportunities where in that integration, second phase of the integration, we eliminate duplication and we refocus the available resources to the core mandate of the department. But we didn't leave it just to one program. Wherever we could, for each objective, we've looked at what a number of different programs could do. So to illustrate, program 6 will now look at how to to have greater coordination and integration between the DTIC and the development finance institutions on incentives. The DTIC has grants, the Industrial Development Corporation has loans, and the NEF has loans. How do we get these to talk more coherently to each other when an individual company applies? And even where can we get them to coordinate and share the technical work that each of them do so that we cut the overhead costs that are incurred when government looks at these things? Let me illustrate with another example of Program 3. Program 3 is of the special economic zones and the industrial parks. We will have a cut in the program budget. We don't have as much money to make available to special economic zones. So what do we do in that? Well, what the APP proposes is that we build now much more coherently the performance management unit that will be available nationally to assist provinces in ensuring that the special economic zones function better, that when new special economic zones are proposed, that we have better assistance and support from national, that we're not simply a banking facility that makes money available to the SEZs, but we also assist the slow performing SEZs and potentially new SEZs with their outputs. And Program 10, which deals with research capability, will then focus on greater analytical and research work to enhance each of the programs from Program 2 to Program 9. So when faced with a resource constraint, we've said, do all of this, shared servers, greater coordination, build up capabilities where you don't have lots of money to give, and use insights that we can gain from analysis and research to enhance the work of the programs so that we get more value for each million rand that government commits. So that's on the resource challenge. And I've given a few examples. The spirit of that, the approach, would permeate the work, or is intended to permeate the work of all of the 10 programs. The second challenge we had was how to protect industrial capacity. The world sits now with a demand challenge. Consumers are not buying as much in many areas as they did before. And that placed the supply units in the economy, which are firms, companies, small businesses, large businesses, they're all placed under enormous strain. And typically what happens is, faced with a strain in a market economy, many firms may close, workers are left unemployed, and over time as the economy recovers, slowly firms restart. But we've learned from our experience that when a firm or a sector closes down, when an entire sector's productive capacity is so weakened that it is unable to perform, when a firm goes into business rescue and later into insolvency, even when you have an uptick in the economy, it is not so easy. You don't switch off and switch on. So the ability to assemble again all the persons, the skills, the management capabilities, the capital, the technology, the machines, all of that is not always possible. So in this period, we prepare to ensure that South Africa has a productive capacity at the end of the storms that is raging through the world in the form of COVID and its impact. We are seeking now to say that we must support local companies and protect where possible. We can't do it everywhere, but where we can, and where there's a sound business case that we can see for it, how we can support our businesses. And there's a number of ways in which we can do it. Program 2, for example, will refocus, the program dealing with trade, so they will refocus the internal capabilities that we have there to support the trade measures that South Africa needs to protect our industrial base and to identify what more we can do to build new markets. And that's an important area I'm going to come back to in my further remarks. Program 6 will introduce measures to save jobs and industrial capacity. That's the program dealing with industrial incentives. So more and more, we will be asking that program to ensure that as it makes resources available, that as part of those resources, it obtains partnership agreements with companies to save jobs wherever possible and to keep the productive capacity running wherever we are able to do so. Program 8, which deals with investment, it's what we know as Invest SA. They will clearly moderate the previous targets that they had set out in a period when we saw that there was still a relatively strong appetite for investment in developing countries. But we've said to them, even if it's tougher out there, how can we use your resources as Invest SA to focus on the more than 600 billion rand of commitments that have been made over the last 2 years by a number of companies, and see which of these can still be supported and assisted. And often it is speeding up regulatory issues, reducing red tape, facilitating supply chains for companies, obtaining the necessary support from suppliers or customers, whatever it may take. Let's jump in there and assist companies that have spotted an opportunity in the South African market and who have said previously that they will be investing. Now, not all of this investment will necessarily be secured in the short term, although as the economy recovers, we remain confident that South Africa will be a major attraction as we rebuild our economy. But even in the short term, there are things that we can do, and Program 8 will work on that. Program 9, which deals with competition, will look at the past competition commitments that companies have made to support suppliers and to build a stronger supply base, to bring small businesses and Black South Africans into the supply bases. And we're going to work with those companies to land as many of those commitments as is possible. They'll also more carefully look at mergers and acquisitions to ensure that the key goals of the Competition Act, which includes employment, industrial capability, and other key measures, are achieved and are attained. But if that is a defensive strategy, as is necessary, we also need a more active strategy to grow opportunity and to grow the investment and production base in the economy. So that brings me to the third broad focus that honorable members will see in the APP. And we do this in focusing a lot of our thinking and our work in the next number of months on the African continent. Our continent, an area that has enormous potential in the long term, and we need to unlock short-term measures to be able to realize more and more of that for ourselves and for the rest of the continent. So Program 2, for example, will look at developing options to fast-track the operationalization of the Continental Free Trade Area, and it will also see what can be done to ensure that we bring as many African countries on board, whereas Program 7 will now, because that's the broad export focus, it will now build in a much stronger African focus in its performance indicators, in its internal work, and its reporting internally on work that is done. Whilst the rest of the continent is a critical focus for us, we also look to new products and new markets. And so Program 4 will deal with how to ensure that the industrial support and strategies we develop will help South Africa to manufacture more personal protective equipment, masks, ventilators, and so on, but also, very importantly, other products. And I spoke previously at the committee meeting about the opportunities that we see there. And so now it's down to drilling down. Over the last number of weeks, I have been meeting with the chief executive officers of major retailers in hardware, in grocery retail, as well as fast food outlets, to identify opportunities to bring product that they currently import back into South Africa. And so a lot of the work of Program 4 and the other programs will be to unlock that. And Program 10 will look at new opportunities in the recovery period. And so it will be carefully analyzing, among others, trade data and other data to see where the opportunities lie for us. The final area that I want to deal with is inclusivity and support. And at the last engagement I had in the committee, I had made the argument strongly why transformation and economic inclusivity remains a critical focus of government in this period, and one that we should unite all of our efforts, including the efforts of all South Africans, to ensure that the transformation that we have been able to achieve is supported and protected, and that in this period we find new opportunities to bring young people into the economy, to bring more women into the economy, to ensure that our Black Industrialist program is active even in the difficult circumstances that we all face. And so as part of that, Program 5, for example, will be looking at the Companies Act. It is reviewing the entire legislative program and seeing what should be fast-tracked, what should be reviewed. And Program 9 looks at price increases and excessive pricing as a means of ensuring that vulnerable consumers and small businesses are not disadvantaged in a period where markets are constrained and normal market supply mechanisms are not always available, and unscrupulous suppliers are able to take advantage of these opportunities to prices unfairly. So there will be a greater focus on things like excessive pricing and so on. So it's really illustrating at a conceptual level that we are saying much of what was in the original annual performance plan, of course, still remains valid because they're instruments to achieve outcomes. So the instruments are valid, but in the light of the greater urgency that COVID and all of the impact of the pandemic has had on us, in light of that urgency, in light of the lower resource base that we can rely on, how do we review our focus, our work, and ensure that we are able to achieve a lot more, and set ourselves very ambitious targets, even though we recognize it will be extremely hard. It will be hard because we have less resources, and it will also be hard because all of our public agencies and the staff of the department work under enormously difficult circumstances, as indeed do firms and small businesses in the economy. So even in these difficult circumstances, it will be necessary to try to do more than we normally would seek to do in terms of the areas of focus, but recognizing, of course, the budget cuts and the new economic realities we have to address. So thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity to sketch more conceptually what the annual performance plan is about, to unlock a little bit of the logic of the revised plan. And I would like to ask if through you, you would be happy that I now ask the Director General to take the committee through the PowerPoint presentation, which summarizes the more detailed document that had been submitted to the Portfolio Committee and to members. So thank you very much for this opportunity to make these introductory remarks, Chairperson.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. I'm sure we can invite the DG to proceed with the actual presentation after your introduction. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Chair.
While they load the presentation, I think the Minister has given quite a comprehensive strategic overview, so I'm not going to go into that, but really get to the heart of the presentation, and give you some detail. And as I said, because of time and because you've got quite a good overview, I would try to focus mainly on those areas where we have made the actual amendments. And as the Minister mentioned, we've added 5 additional indicators and a comprehensive set of new interventions, and I'll focus on that. So as usual, we will start with a global overview to just understand our economic reality, and then we will go into the detail of our different interventions. If we go to the next slide, where, as I said, we sketch both the global and the domestic overview, I think, as was mentioned, we face threats and opportunities. And in terms of the threats, obviously the biggest factor is that what is expected from an outlook point of view is that global growth is projected to decline, to have negative growth of minus 4.9%, just shy of 5%, which is a reduction in global growth. And as I said, the only positive in the global environment is that a sort of U-shaped recovery is expected. That means we expect a quick rebound in 2021. Of course, the reduction in global GDP growth is going to have big impacts on the demand for export products, because there will be less demand for our exports, so that is the biggest risk to our outlook. Secondly, there could be a tightening of financial conditions, a withdrawal of liquidity, which then could pressure on our domestic debt markets and so on. So that is the sort of the global environment. So the biggest takeout is the decline in global growth. If we then turn to the next slide, which deals with our own domestic situation, as I said, we Stats South Africa presented the report for the first quarter of 2020, and as I said, the outlook does not look very positive, and it recorded a decline in GDP for the quarter by 2%. And as you can see, it is across quite a broad range of sectors, but the biggest decline has been in mining, and then 21%, very significant, then manufacturing 8%, and then the utilities by 5.6%, and then similarly construction. As you can see, because the economy is an interconnected ecosystem where impact on one sector impacts all others, the main reason for this decline appears to be that the reduced demand from China, because of the decline in manufacturing in China, our mining exports was reduced. Because our mines need less, there's also now less input from our manufacturing sector into the mining industry. They need less explosive, less chemicals, less petroleum, less steel, and so on, less from our own industries and so on. So we can see then the negative outlook for GDP in the first quarter. If we then also project in the next slide, you will see then that whilst the prognosis differs, again, we expect in terms of the presentation that was done to yourselves a week or two ago by the finance minister, is that GDP is projected for 2020 of minus 7.2%. As I said, the IMF and the World Bank is slightly more optimistic, and they expect a negative growth of minus 5.8% and 4% respectively. And so on. As I said, the only positive that we can take out of this is that all the projections show that could potentially, if we manage our interventions very carefully, we could then come back to positive growth in 2021. So as I said, to emphasize the point the minister makes is you will see try to preserve our industrial base during this period of negative growth so that we can be there and still be in the race when demand and the economy picks up. So therefore, you can see we will take a number of defensive measures to preserve our industrial base in the later points. If we then go to the following slide, again, we look at gross domestic, gross fixed capital formation, or what is really just investment levels. As you know, this indicator is very important because before you can get growth of GDP of goods and services, there must be investment. And this is the indicator of investment. And here it shows that in the first quarter, a decline of 20%. Further, you can see it's driven by both the public and private sectors have reduced their levels of investment, 20% and 25% respectively. And as you can see, we're moving further away from our target. It's now about 19% of GDP. And as you know, the National Development Plan talks about we need to try to get growth of 30% of GDP. So as you know, you will see then what measures we take to try to maintain our levels of investment and the commitments we made later on. If we can go to the following slide, there's just to conclude on the economic outlook, I will just quickly go into the situation with regards to jobs. And again, there's a decline of 30%, and our employment now stands at 16.38 million. As you can see, this is quite it's for the first time in a long time that, as I said, we have been steadily 2 decades. We've moved. We face the threat now of an increase in the unemployment. To the next slide, you can see that the impact of the job losses falls disproportionately on young people and on women, and because the and youth that are negatively impacted. And you will then see why we are putting emphasis on targeting women and youth employment, youth internships, the YES program, and the different measures we are putting in place to ensure that we protect vulnerable groups. But as you know, we need to, in this period, cushion the impact on women and youth. So if we then go to the final 2 slides, it's really just to look at the trade situation. And as you can see, the positive news again is that we have been able to maintain our general trade balance and trade surplus globally, whilst there have been a general decline in both the level of exports and inputs. The only positive is that we still have fundamental strengths within our economy, as even admitted by the rating agencies. So on this front, you can see, and then you will see in our interventions later on, part of our offensive interventions is really to expand our exports, both to the continent, but also to the key growth markets, especially within the BRICS countries and to Europe, and to maintain our focus on the US market. But this is to maintain our trade surplus and to ensure that in this period, because of the global oversupply, we don't run into a trade deficit. You will then go on to the continent, and as I said, we maintain our comparative advantage here and our trade surplus. And as you can see, our exports to the continent amounted to 93 billion in Q4, and imports only 41 billion. So we had a trade surplus of 51 billion. And you will see later on in our interventions, and as mentioned by the minister, the main reason for, or the bulk of our exports to the continent is concentrated within SACU, Botswana, Lesotho and Swaziland, but also within SADC, Zambia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola, and so on. So clearly, that is the reason for that is that we have a preferential trade agreements. There's no tariffs on our products, and how we enter those markets duty-free. So the key focus now is going to be, as you will see later on, is accelerating the continental free trade area, which will also then give us reduced tariff and market access into the rest of the really on prioritizing the continent and growing the continental inter-Africa trade. Chair, if we then go on to the next slide, which again deals with the BRICS countries. And again, as mentioned, and thanks for the inputs, the committee has always highlighted these ones, and we thank you for your contribution. So we have tried to define and refine our interventions, because the BRICS countries, we have a trade deficit with our BRICS partners, and especially with China. And as you can see there, the level of exports and imports. So our key focus is going to be, and already the minister has made a number of interventions at the BRICS meetings. We've tried to open more markets for our products in the in BRICS markets, but also we have given clear indication that we are no longer going to tolerate under invoicing and exports from those countries. So we hope to tighten up, and that's just part of our defensive strategy, which you will see later on. We're going to try to reduce the amount of imports into our market, and in that way we'll also then improve our trade position with regards to the BRICS countries. Chair, if we can then conclude, that sets the scene for the global, the economic environment, and as I said, sets the tone and the strategic environment for our interventions. And as you can see, the central thrust of our program is still the 500 billion economic recovery package that was announced by the president. Also, again, as mentioned by the minister, key focus is going to be on our master plans, and as the decisive interventions into both maintaining and expanding strategic sectors. And then finally, we want to really continue, even though we will make more qualitative interventions, but really to still secure those investments that was made in 2018, 2019 at the investment conference. The other big intervention, as I mentioned, and as mentioned previously, is we're going to take advantage of the opportunities brought by the African continental free trade area and the greater preferential access we will be receiving in those big markets of Kenya, Egypt, Nigeria, Ghana, and so on, once we get higher levels of preference. Then, of course, the other big one is going to be part of our defensive strategy to reduce the level of imports is going to be the localization drive, and here we really call on the support of the committee to really, we can't bow any longer to pressure from SOEs and other even the private sector want to rely on imports. We're going to have to now create jobs locally through increased localization. And then the special economic zones was mentioned. We are going to more vigorously pursue the growth in these zones through a much more active role for national government, and then the revitalization of those industrial parks in our rural areas, in our townships, and to provide much needed support. And then, of course, we maintain our program that we face a really strong opportunity to really support our Black enterprises and to create, to expand our entrepreneurial base through the Black Industrial Program. Chair, those are the key sets of interventions in summary that will inform our key targets and so on. If we then go to the key, I'm not going to spend much time on that flag. You are familiar with this, but just to emphasize Then, as was mentioned, we face a constrained environment, minus 16%, 1.7 billion reduction in our budget. But we still, despite the case, we're going to work more smartly, and we have therefore increased our indicators, our output indicators, from 30 to 35, and I'll give you the detail. But as I said, we remain a very strong and focused department with 17 entities and 45 pieces of legislation, and we used to work very cooperatively, and you will see how we will create reduce costs by working more closely with our entities, and how we will use our legislation smartly to be able to protect our industrial base. Then if I go into the actual key priorities, again, I'm not going to go into this one. It has been set out where our key issues are. As mentioned, we've divided our work, and we will maintain our focus in the 10 key programs. So we will maintain all of these programs, but we will just more sharply focus them. And as I said, we will work in a much more collaborative way with both the private sector, with the banks, and with our DFIs to more effectively implement our program. If we then turn to the first one, Program 1, Administration, again, we will continue our focus on employment equity, and especially the empowerment of women within our senior management services. We will continue our good track record with regards to employing persons with disability. But our new ones we are adding, and you will see here is first, we are going to we currently have a system in place, and we adding it as a new indicator. We want to, within the department and within our DTIC campus, reduction in the transmission of COVID at the workplace. We are working closely with other companies to be best practice in terms of the safety of our own employees, and also putting all the health and safety measures in place to protect us, and that is the COVID-19. So that is one of our new indicators. And then the second big one is going to be, we're going to develop a shared services for the DTIC and its 17 entities by, for example, combining accounting services, auditing services, HR, legal services, and so on. We can then we can reduce the costs and therefore deal with the reduction in spending, but we can still work in a much more efficient way. So these are the two new indicators. And then obviously the merger, and we are now, as DTIC, we're in the second phase of our restructuring. And as I said, we will then, as I said, add to our capabilities through the merger and the effective integration of the former DTI and former EDD. So, Chair, that I move on then, and then here we set up specific indicators. We maintain the existing ones of targeting women in senior management, people with disabilities, and we add then the 3 new targets regarding COVID-19, the implementation of the NMARC process, and as I said, the development of the shared services between us and our entities. The following slide, Chair, then just provides all the detail on that, and then we turn to Program 2, which is trade policy. I'm going to go a bit faster now. As was indicated, this will be our big area, which is focusing on the continent, and we are really going to expedite and increase the pace of our work in concluding the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, improve the modalities, the tariff reductions, the rules of origin, and so on. And that is then our new indicator that we add with regards to focusing and developing clear export strategies and working with the private sector so that we can grow our market share vis-a-vis other countries from outside the continent, where we will increase and grow our exports on the continent. So that's the main change to Program 2. We obviously want to maintain and slowly expand our markets. So you will see there, we will continue with the tripartite free trade area. We will also continue with the SADC, our partnership with the European Union, and maintain our market share and grow it in some products. Important one is the exit of the Brexit issue, which will come into effect at the end of this year, and we will, as I said, we will continue to put in place our monitor the implementation of our insurance policy, the agreement which was very ably negotiated around that, and then. At the multilateral level, we will try to just protect our space to be able to grow our own exports and reduce imports. Then if we go to the program 3, which is really the one that targets tries to remove the concentration out of just Gauteng, KZN, and Western Cape, where we develop all our provinces. So the big focus here and the new indicator we've added is the establishment of the National SEZ Capacity Support Unit, because all of the provinces have asked for more support from national, so we will have a dedicated facility to assist. So instead of just supporting through money and finances, it will really be with management capability, where we and we have already shown how we have done that in, for example, the work in the Tshwane SEZ, in the Vaal, in Kgalagadi, and in Bojanala, where we can intervene by playing a more. So it's the establishment of this SEZ capacity unit. We add that, and then that will support our. And then we will continue with our program of the 27 industrial parks that we will continue. And as you will see, there is now 10 SEZs, and it covers all the provinces, and we will be actively working on that. The minister has already had a number of sessions with the MECs, and our deputy ministers will be continuing this program with regards to assisting all the provinces around the implementation of the SEZs in this period. Then the other work will continue around the Black economic empowerment and the targets that have been set there. If we then come to industrialization, program 4, again, it was mentioned, we will now develop the 3 master plans, and these are focused on labor-intensive sectors. We will be focusing, as you know, we have already finalized strong master plans for poultry, for clothing, textile, footwear, and for the automotive sector. We will now be focusing on furniture, on steel, and on sugar, and drive these sectors out. The additional one, and this is the new indicator as well, is on the localization of personal protective equipment, from hand sanitizers to production of masks, test kits, ventilators, and so on. But this is going to be the growth sector, not only in the year, but on the continent. And South Africa, we want to position ourselves as the key supplier for the entire continent with regards to PPEs. And this is our new indicator. We have already started supporting companies producing PPEs, but this is our new indicator as well. And we will continue the localization with the designations as mentioned. So here we just specify in more detail the growth, the new master plans for sugar, steel, and furniture. As you know, we have to give up some programs, and we will push into 2021, then the other master plans. Then turning to consumer and corporate regulation, as indicated, this takes on a heightened importance now, because the need to protect consumers from abuse and also companies abusing their market dominance, price gouging, and so on. So our work will be reviewing legislation in the Companies Act, the credit legislation, the copyright, performance protection, and gambling. Also, as was shown in the COVID, we have to deal more decisively with liquor, alcohol abuse. Also, there is abuse now of people being blacklisted and so on. So we're developing our policies in the areas of gambling, liquor, credit, consumer protection, and lotteries, and especially the ongoing work with regards to the National Credit Amendment Act. So again, here we have amended our consumer and corporate regulation environment with regards to the new challenges and development. And then this slide just gives out the detail around that. If we go to the next program, which is industrial financing, and as you will see with the budget, the biggest burden of the cut falls on industrial financing. But again, we have to adapt to the new reality and there's two new measures we are adopting and two new indicators in this one. The first one is that we are finalizing the economic recovery program, which will be introduced, which will really deal with companies in distress, and companies, on the one hand, companies in distress, and on the other hand, we need to support companies who have the potential to grow and expand. So in this one, this is part of our job retention strategy and of preserving our industrial capability during the difficult period. So this ERP is that program we will put in place. And then also, how do we deal with the less money? We are going to now work very closely with our DFIs, IDC, NEF, and also other government agencies, and then also with the private banks. Here, we're going to cut costs by not everybody doing due diligence separately. DTI does one, NEF does one, IDC. We will coordinate our decision making, and we will de-risk work, for example, by giving a grant, then easier for the NEF or IDC to provide loan finance, or for the banks to come in with liquidity. So by combining, we try to do more, because we can give a smaller grant, we can supplement that with loan finance. So that is, and then also we're reducing overheads by combining some of the work we're doing. So that is the industrial financing program. So there's a major innovation with regards to industrial financing. We then revise the target. As I said, we then proceed and to then revise, and it is set out there. We hope to leverage private sector investment through this program of 5 billion. That will be set out there, and then we add the two new indicators around the economic recovery program, and then also a more integrated assessment system between the DTIC and the entities. If we then go to program 7, which is, as I said, part of our offensive program, which is to grow new markets while we're going to face a constrained domestic spending. We will then look at, as I said, we add the new indicators. So the new indicators is really to try to expand the base of exporters and to get more companies that didn't previously look at the African market or look at exporting. We will add new companies and work on supporting new companies to take advantage. If we go to the next slide, you will see the work on export development. We add new indicators also to, as I said, improve our interventions on the African continent. We set out, for example, the new indicators. There's 25 new enterprises that we want to create. Besides supporting traditional exporters, we add to new ones, but also we add a number of interventions where companies face barriers to get into new markets, whether it be into China or Mozambique or Zimbabwe. We look at increasing the amount of collaborating intergovernmentally to lift those barriers and through trade facilitation. We're also looking at working much more closely with the ECIC, our export financing program. We've already called meetings between ECIC, IDC, Development Bank of South Africa, where we can leverage those finances to support our exporters more explicitly. In the next slide on export development, we also just give you all the details of our new indicators. Then if we turn to program 8, which is really the inward investment, Investment South Africa, and there we have revised our targets accordingly, but we have now increased the amount. We're going to focus our work around investment facilitation, and we are having a rapid response unit now where we intervene very quickly. Within 48 hours, we try to reduce any bottlenecks or any impediments to investment. And for example, just in Quadakuza, in Stanger, we intervene immediately to, for example, secure land for job creation of 3,300 persons in a auto component company. But that is the new way of doing, or the expansion of the Mercedes-Benz plant in East London. We're going to undertake much more interventions to unblock and fast track investment impediments. So that is where qualitative change rather than just increasing the amount of money we put into projects. And then, Chair, we've revised those indicators. Then program 9, as indicated by the Minister, here we need to, we face challenges on 2 fronts. As you said, companies are using this situation to price gouge and to abuse their market dominance. And then the other threat we face is because of the decline in the share price and in the market capitalization of big companies from Sasol to others, where companies' share price have been reduced by 70–80%. They are quick now where foreign predators can take up a big intellectual property at very cheap prices, and we need to ensure that we have a defensive strategy, and our monitoring mergers and acquisition is going to be very important. So we've amended this by, as I said, supporting the regulatory framework with regards to unfair pricing and abuse of dominance, and then secondly, closer scrutiny of mergers and acquisitions in relation to strategic investments in our economy. And then again, we will continue to protect the public interest. That is, when there is mergers and acquisitions, there is no unnecessary job losses as a result of the acquisition. So competition takes on importance, and we have amended those indicators accordingly. Then we just set out in the next slide the details around those APPs. And then if we come to the final program 10, which is economic research and coordination, again, we've amended this because, as you know, we are in unprecedented territory. There's a new economic environment, there's a new normal, a new equilibrium, and we need to ensure that we have accurate data and we base our interventions on clear evidence. And therefore, this function takes on an added significance in this period, and we have therefore adapted it in terms of our new offensive and defensive strategy. Then we set out the number of reports we will be doing in this area. Chair, in conclusion, if I just very quickly take you through the changes in the budget, in the revised budget as presented by the Minister of Finance, as was indicated now, we have a reduction. It's a very significant cut. It's unprecedented. It's 1.7 billion rand, and our budget reduces to 9.3 billion from 11 billion. Chair, but as you say, we have then, if you'd like to look further into this, you will see the breakdown into the different areas. And here, as indicated, the big cut is in the area of public corporations and private enterprises. That is really the incentive program. And as you know, the bulk of our money goes to private enterprises through our incentive and financing program. That is a significant reduction of over 20%. The entities, the 17 entities, There's a reduction of 14.9%, and hence, as you can see, why we needed to now have more shared services and a cost reduction by integrating our work more clearly. There's a reduction in goods and services and so on. But as indicated, the big reduction is in the area of industrial financing and so on. If we go then, in summary, then what we've indicated, we will now work within this revised budget, but we will continue. 59% of our budget still goes to companies, which means we use that to preserve and to grow our industrial base. We also, as I said, the big reduction is on our departmental entities, but as I said, we have put new measures in place to live with this new reality. And then there's the reduction in our operational expenditure. But again, we have adapted now with new digital working, e-meetings, and remote working. We are also adapting to the new environment. Chair, the rest just gives you a more graphical representation of the adjusted budget and where our work lies. As you can see, we will continue spending the 37% on direct business incentives, 13% on infrastructure incentive, which brings us to about 59–60% of our budget will still be spent on the core business. And on that, I have to say, Hialibucha, thank you very much, and Siyabonga kakhulu.
Thank you very much. I'm sure we can be able to then get there's a echo on the sound. There is a report that was circulated also from the research unit, and I think one wanted just to highlight the issues that were actually cited as issues that maybe the department and ministry can be able to look at on the supplementary budget analysis, because largely I think with the changes in the budget, one wanted just to check maybe from ministry and department which performance targets will be affected. I think maybe as a first question, one thought maybe we should actually raise that linked to the research unit analysis issues that were highlighted. There is a second point which I wanted just to raise, public corporations and private enterprises. There will obviously be suspensions and postponements, and there will be reduced support to that space. What does the DTIC expect to be the impact on the economy based on that? I think the final point linked to issues that were raised as well was the 500 million rands prioritized in terms of firms in distress. One wanted just to check the criteria of selection of those to be assisted. And one wanted just to have a question as well, or if this funding is additional to the IDC or is actually separate from the IDC. So I thought I should actually just raise those comments, questions first, and then invite the committee members to be able to actually pick up on questions for clarities and or comments. Can I ask members
Chair?
of the portfolio committee?
Chair?
Yes, Andre, Secretary.
Ms. Yaku, followed by Mr. Mulder, Chair.
Yaku and Mulder. Honorable Yaku.
Thank you, Chairperson. I wish I could put on my video, but I'm not getting enough reception when my video is on.
Yeah,
so
we
I'll
hear you
just
very
speak.
clearly.
Yeah. Okay.
Very audible.
Basically, my questions are combined between the minister and the DG. The minister mentioned the special economic zones, that they would build a performance management unit now, so as to assist the special economic zones. Now, I'm wondering, what was the measurement before of reporting in terms of the SEZs, in terms of how did they account for the monies they're spending? How do they account for the programs? Because as we speak, we are running out of budget, and we don't want to channel monies, on units after units, on projects after projects, whereas we could focus on giving more capacity directly to those ACZs. Secondly, I remember asking, why do we not have a state-owned company that produces PPE? For me, it seems odd that we are focusing mainly on supporting businesses, scattered businesses, producing different types of PPE, when we can have a state-owned company that would then produce that PPE for the whole country, and we would get one standard. Thirdly, I remember asking about the list of who benefits from the Black Industrialist Program, because I get a sense that it benefits a few, and it benefits the elite, and it benefits mostly men. So I remember asking the department to give me a list, at least, and a demographic of how it is spread, the investment towards the industrialist program. And also just a comment, I'm happy that the DG mentioned that there would be also a focus on the furniture industry, as I highlighted last time, that this industry has been long neglected, and it's an industry that is dying, and it's an industry that we're not looking into, especially since it has a potential of bringing so much revenue for the country in terms of jobs as well as revenue. So that's all I have to say. Thank you, Chairperson.
Chair,
Chair, you are muted.
Your mic is off, Chair.
Honorable Mulder.
Thank you, Chair. I did read your lips, but I just wanted to hear to confirm to hear your voice before I started. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Honourable Minister, Chairs, DG. This is a real difficult situation that we find ourselves in, and there's, of course, no easy way out. In previous meetings, the Minister stressed that he was looking into how we can reopen the economy. And what we're talking about here is, in fact, just that, not more than that, to reopen the economy. And we're not talking about economic growth. And if we take into account that the budget will decrease by 1.77 billion rand, we're sitting with a situation that we've got less of what we actually need more of. I welcome the fact that more focus will be on localization. Future lies within localization and exports, of course, depending on what the world markets, how they would react to it. But what I'm concerned about is a lot of the policies that I see is policies that, and of course we will, with respect, we will differ on that, policies that has not worked in the past. And I've already offered a hand to the Minister to contribute from the Freedom Front Plus side on how we see the future of the economy, the new economy of South Africa, which he welcomed. The Freedom Front Plus will interact with the Minister in this regard. And what I want to stress is that we should do certain things differently. Otherwise, we're going to sit with a situation that we've got a decreased budget and we will have decreased results. So I would urge us all to relook at the situation, because this budget won't exist on its own in isolation with other departments. I think on its own, one couldn't do much different than what was presented today. But I think we should take an extra step looking into the future, and we still should engage on that. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Chair.
All right. Yes,
Ms. Mwatse, followed by Mr. Thring, Chair.
Mwatse, and then Thring to follow. Honorable Mwatse.
Thank you, Chair. Let me also welcome the presentation done by Honorable Minister and the DG. In the presentation, DG, there is a reference in the revised plan to prioritize textile master plan and postponement of other master plans. Then my question is, which master plans will be postponed? Thank you, Chairperson.
Okay, Thring, Honorable Thring.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I have a few questions, but maybe just a comment first. I think very clearly the economy in South Africa is in trouble and the wheels are about to come off. Having said that, Chair, I think race-based policies that have failed must go, understanding that we have a history that needed to be addressed. But where certain policies are not helping the economy, we can't keep on trying to make failed policies work. It is at this particular stage that we need all hands on deck, irrespective of color or class. We don't just need black industrialist programs or just white industrialist programs. We need a South African industrialist program. I believe that our black folk are smart, they're intelligent, and they are just as capable as any other race group. And so hence they should not just be singled out as the only ones to receive handouts, because this will result in a entitlement mentality. So as I said, Chair, the ship is sinking, and which is our economy, and we need all South Africans to on deck. That's it. Slides 9 to 11 speaks to a trade surplus with the rest of the world, Africa. We continue to record trade deficits with our BRICS partners, particularly over the last 5 years, mainly as a consequence of manufactured imports. So why is this is the reason why the ACDP has been pushing for beneficiation. But what has been done differently to turn this around? The deficit that we have with regards to our BRICS partners. The DG, the Director General, spoke about localization. But in which sectors is localization to be undertaken, and when will this be done? Slide 16 speaks to furniture and steel master plans to be prioritized and others postponed. Which are the others that are going to be postponed? Noting that the automotive, poultry, and the retail master plans were to be implemented. What is the rationale for the postponement? Where slide 24 speaks to increased industrialization through the development of the master plans, and slide 25 speaks to 5 master plans being developed between 2020-21 and 21-22. Slide 18 talks about the shared service model. This is more to the minister. How is this shared service model going to improve efficiencies at DTIC, and why was this not done earlier? I know that the Director General spoke about within the accounting sector and sharing information with regards to accounting practices and so on. But what are the other efficiencies? Then second to last question, a number which is I think Honorable Yako touched on this. There's a number of industrial parks pre-1994 that are currently closed. If revived, these have the potential to create employment.
Yes.
How many of these have been identified? I heard a figure of 27 by the Director General, but how many of these have been identified? This is your industrial parks. And do we have, I think that there's somebody's speaking.
Can someone mute? Yeah, I can hear
It's
that
me,
they're disturbing
Chair.
you. Okay, Hermans, Judy. Okay, continue, Honorable Thring. Sorry for that.
So my question here with regards to the industrial parks, Chair, is how many of these industrial parks around the country have been identified, and have plans been put in place to improve the infrastructure around these plants, because they certainly have the ability to create employment? And then finally, Chair, the value of outward and inward projected investments leverage from approved projects is down from a previous 75 billion, target of 75 billion to 5 billion, and 100 billion to 40 billion respectively. Why is this so, and why were the output indicators also at the bottom of that particular slide removed? Sorry, Chair, my last question is, if PPP agreements for office accommodation is a cost driver, what mitigation strategies are in place to reduce the cost driver effect? DTIC is going to have to do more with less. And which are the entities or sectors that are going to be impacted by the 16% reduced budget? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair?
Yes.
Mr. McPherson, followed by Mr. Cuthbert, Chair.
McPherson and Cuthbert. In the order,
Thanks.
Honourable McPherson.
Thanks very much. Minister, I'd like to know, what do you see as the main differences in how the department is going to move forward with respect how it has done previously? What are the main differences or the main policy differences? Because as one of the colleagues had said earlier, you know, with respect, the department is shackled to government policies that have not changed and which have largely contributed to the recession that was baked in going into COVID. So if you can just give me some examples of some of the policy issues that will make a difference. There's a number of entities, Minister, that are really struggling and failing in reality. One of them you know yourself is the National Lotteries Commission, and you heard about the unwillingness of this committee to deal with the serious allegations against it. We now have a legal opinion that says that the National Lotteries Commission must, in fact, disclose beneficiaries, despite you also telling them to do so. They refuse to do so. I know you've instituted investigations into the Lotteries Commission, but how are you planning to right-size that ship, which is failing spectacularly? When it comes to ITAC, and you and the DG spoke passionately about trade, you know, ITAC is also a real stumbling block to to trade and to localization in South Africa. And I'll give you an example which the DG is very aware of how ITAC simply refused to move on allowing manufacturers to import fabrics that are not made in South Africa, will never be made in South Africa, only for those hospital sheets and bed sheets to be fully imported from China, because no manufacturer could get hold of the fabric because the duty made it too expensive. Surely ITAC have a responsibility to look at issues like that, which affect trade domestically and internationally. I see in your APP, you talk to some of the regulatory environment, but with respect, Minister, and I know that you weren't the Minister in the Fifth Parliament of this committee or this department, but the department's been talking about regulatory change on credit since 2006. They've been talking about regulatory change on alcohol for 7 years. They've been talking about regulatory change on gambling for 10 years and have in fact even ignored their own commissions into gambling with respect to online gambling. So, I mean, you know, I feel that they're pushing you out to say something that the department has no intention of reforming or doing anything about regulatory issues. Is there any discussion or view on extending the I-12 tax incentive? That has been a phenomenally successful incentive and opportunity by the DTI, which is a non-cash payment. So it does not effectively affect the payments or distributions of the department. You will know it's done in conjunction with National Treasury. But I really do believe that, you know, lowering the threshold for the I-12 could really assist businesses in struggling times like this. And then my last point will be on SEZs and industrial parks. I have fought valiantly against industrial parks for the last 6 years, because not one of them have shown any promise of attracting any investment whatsoever. The department still cannot give me a single new investor into the industrial parks, despite having a budget of nearly R500 million over the last 6 years. There's nothing to show for it. Surely any new investment, Minister, into industrial parks must be measured against one, a business plan to attract new businesses, and two, to secure the concessions by local and provincial governments, which made the industrial parks feasible in the first place, for nefarious reasons, of course, but they can only work if they have concessions by local and provincial governments because of their remote locality. Thank you very much.
Okay, Cuthbert, Honorable Cuthbert.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And just to start off by saying thank you to Minister Patel for his well wishes. They were well received and much appreciated. Chairperson, just a couple of points that I'd like to raise. The first point is, Chair, when are we likely to see a report of the investigation into the National Lotteries Commission? We received Minister Patel's letter, but I didn't see an indication of submission of that particular report and whether that will be shared with the Portfolio Committee. The second issue is regarding the oral response that I received, where there was agreement on the COVID-19 relief fund, was not so much now the release of the beneficiaries rather, but the length of time. Now, I understand that the COVID pandemic is going to be with us for a significant while to come. However, that adjudication period in itself implies that some beneficiaries, if taken at the longest possible time, may only receive money for good causes in this instance by the mid of November. What is going to be done to mitigate against that possible delay, noting that a number of NGOs and NPOs are currently without funding? And then the last question that I wanted to ask the Minister, Chairperson, was surrounding the reduction in budget and what he believes will look towards the IFB branch in particular, what their function will be now that incentives have been so drastically reduced. If he could just give us a little bit of feedback and what is in line for that particular branch of his department. Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Chair?
Secretariat?
Mr. Mbuyane, followed by Ms. Mantash and Ms. Hermans.
Mbuyane? Honorable Mbuyane?
Yes, Chairperson.
Yes.
Chair, thank you for the opportunity. And also, Chair, welcome the presentation by the Minister, both Prime Minister and the DG. Chair, I've got some clarity-seeking questions, Chairperson, here in terms of the reduced budget, the new player in the market. The biggest cut is in the incentive program with the DFI and also the program of industrialization. Maybe my question on that one will be, how are we going to be able to create jobs in terms of while we have been able to cut the process of the incentive program? Chairperson, also the trade policy to protect our industry. I just wanted to check in terms of the protectionist, Chairperson, whether the industrial financing will be able to enhance the domestic industrial finance in terms of the system to reduce the overhead. The other one is in terms of, yes, we know and understand that the budget has been cut, more especially in the department. What measures are in place in terms of dealing with that perspective, Chairperson? Chair, we cannot hide in terms of the history of trade, Chairperson, by David Ricardo, that the theory of comparative advantage nation should be specific, Chairperson. And now is the time that we should look at our economic policies, Chairperson, how to deal with them, given the situation that we are confronted with. To have any program on, in fact, industry promotion to develop our economy successfully, we have industrialization is required. And I'm happy that I can see that the industrialization is part of the process, so that our infant industry are promoted and also we're able to protect and block the market for them to can be able to move forward, Chairperson. Maybe the last one will be the ethical critique, Chairperson, in terms of trade liberalization. To create adjustment codes for workers that will be able to create jobs, and also firms and companies that will be able to, in countries, to be able to get their revenue so that we are moving forward, Chairperson, in terms of process. Then the last one, Chair, will be on the economic recovery program in terms of saving jobs. I just need more clarity in terms of that one. Hence, we have reduced budget on the other side, Chairperson. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Chair, your mic, Chair.
Honorable Mantashe. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chair, first I must talk on some contributions that there has been some failed policies that have brought us to where we are today. I don't buy into that assertion, Chair. I don't think there's been any policy failure in the current phase, but there has been a pandemic that has befallen the world. So I don't think there's policies that must be done away with, because we think the ones that we've enacted are really suitable for the type of a country that we are as South Africa, Chairperson. Chair, all of us are worried about the 1.7 billion budget cut in this department. And I want to check with the DG. In the last program of the department was a program of continuing to revitalize industrial parks and establishing new ones. And my proposal would be, because we are faced with a bloodbath of job losses, how about us going back for the second round of those that have been established already, so that they can be ready to be able to attract business into them, instead of starting new ones. All of them will be left dysfunctional, Chairperson. But I don't think that establishing new ones will be a good option for us, looking at the financial position of the country and the economy of the country as well. Chair, in their program 6, they talk of integration between departments or cooperation between departments and the SOEs. And my mind runs to thinking of a proposal that we made as a committee, that we think that NEF and IDC, when they can be merged together, they can produce a strong financial institution that would assist Black businesses to grow. And we know that currently they need too much support so that they don't close shop. Chair, they talk about, the minister said they will cooperate with private sector to support companies and invest in the economy. And my question would be, the private sector has been sitting on millions and millions of rands, Chairperson, that they have not invested over time. Hence, we are in this situation now. What are they going to do best, different now, that will, force them to invest in the economy of their own country? Chair, the pandemic has shown us strengths and weaknesses in the way that we do things as a country. I'm talking about the support for entrepreneurs, especially SMMEs and emerging companies, Chair. during this pandemic, Chair, we noticed that despite the pronouncement by the President, Chair, that one of the things that we can do to improve the economy of the country was to really concentrate also on township and rural economy. And during this time of the pandemic, Chair, we noticed that most of businesses in the rural and township was owned by people or foreign nationals. And I'm trying to check what can we do to ensure that we put laws in place that would really assist us in ensuring that most businesses are run by South Africans so that we can be able to extend a helping hand to them to grow our economy, because my experience and what I've observed during this time is that those foreign nationals do not pay taxes to the South African economy, and supporting them for me is problematic. I had a lot. Let me stop there for now, Chair. Sorry, Chairperson. On the AFCTA, when we were last briefed by the department, they were saying the only outstanding issue on it being finalized was agreeing by countries on the rules of origin. Has that been finalized? Because we think this is the only way out, that we really trade with the continent first before we can go outside the current situation. Thank you very much.
Honorable Hammonds.
Hi, thank you very much, Chair, and thank you to the Minister and the DG for this presentation. A 16% budget cut is very serious, and if it was a haircut, I'm sure it would have left you bald, Minister. But let me take this opportunity to appreciate the work, Minister, that you and the DG and your team have done to revise this budget, especially to address the challenges in this global pandemic. So we realize that it must have been a very serious balancing act that you had to do, because it is the whole world, trade in the whole world that has been affected. So we note that you are going to keep transformation and economic inclusivity as a priority. And despite the statements made by some members of this committee, want to continue to keep it a priority, because we are in a very unequal society in South Africa. I'm of the opinion, Minister, that we must strengthen our offensive strategy that has been spoken about by the DG, and that in particular localization and, of course, maintaining, preserving and protecting our industrial base must be a priority as we wait for this economy to reboot itself. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Chair.
Yes, Secretariat.
Ms. Mutahung, Chair, would be the last.
Okay. Mutahung. Okay.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair, for the opportunity. I have only one question under Program 6 on industrial financing. I just want to check, how will the department enhance the domestic industrial finance system to crown in more funding to enterprise and streamline industrial support? Thanks, Chair.
I'm sure we can be able to go back to Minister and the DG ministry and the DG to be able to actually pick up on the issues. I'm not sure of what the order would be. Secretariat, I'm sure those are all the questions and comments.
Correct, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can we then actually have it back to Minister and DG and the response or comments? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairperson. I want to thank the members for the thoughtful questions and, in some cases, suggestions that are wrapped up in the questions, which we would certainly want to think through. Chair, I'm going to respond to as many of the questions that relate more broadly to the broader policy and strategic frame. And I'm sure the DG will be the sweeper and deal with the areas that I'm not able to go into the detail, or because of time, there may not be an opportunity. And the deputy ministers, of course, may also want to comment right in the end on any of the areas that they've covered that I may not have sufficiently addressed. So I'd like to start, Chairperson, with your question that you've raised, which deals with the reorganization of the budget. Now, everybody's talked about the 1.7 billion rand cut, but because it's a 1.77 billion rand cut, it's really closer to a 1.8 billion rand cut. And Honorable Hermans has commented on the impact of this, and she said if it was my hair, I would be bald by now. I just say, Honorable Hermans, in a light-hearted way, that this is more than a haircut. This is taken off skin and bone and flesh. Because when you have a cut of this order of magnitude, you can't simply make a few small adjustments and absorb it. It is hard. And so we needed to see where we can enhance the impact of our work, given that we don't have as much money. And under public corporations and private enterprises, that is the core subsidy program where the state provides a range of incentives. Really, I shouldn't say subsidy, because we've moved away from the old passive subsidy to a much more smart incentive program where the state would provide some support in return for private enterprises doing other things. In some cases, they would need to make matching investment commitments or job commitments or innovation commitments. Now, that's quite a hard blow. So in the rest of the APP, we've tried to say, what are the other tools that's available that can support the different sectors? And let me give the example. If we are to reduce the support we provide to a manufacturing sector, can we use trade tools more actively? Are there things that the competition authorities can do that opens up greater level of dynamism and competition in those sectors? So we are looking at rebalancing our toolkit. Obviously, the finance is a critical tool, but when that shrinks, then there are other things we need to do. Some of the adjustments are just recognizing that some companies will not utilize the incentives that we have in place. They won't do so because demand for their products are lower, the more limited confidence that they have about the growth prospects in the next few months may get them to delay some programs, upgrading of technology or improving their plants in operation. Some of that will be slower. So in some ways, a little bit of the reduction recognizes the economic reality. But of course, our incentive programs must also play what we call a counter-cyclical role, meaning precisely at the point where the investor confidence is going down, a set of sharp and focused support programs by government can help to inject a little bit of liquidity and confidence in those sectors. So that's why we are trying to see, and I know I'm answering a few members' questions in one go, and I say part of what we're seeking to do is to release more resources for the critical programs, frontline programs, through the shared services and other arrangements. Our overhead cost structure is difficult to change in the short term. So it's about using the remaining part of this financial year to do the work to see how we can bring down some of the overhead costs that the department and the entities face. And both I and the DG have given examples of those kind of things. We cited the example of the program dealing with industrial incentives, that we create shared services there, a common platform, or a coordinated platform to assess the viability of a proposal that is sometimes put to the IDC for loan funding and the Department for grant funding, and potentially to the NEF for loan funding. Now, instead of 3 sets of officials working on it, if we can get 1 set of officials working on that in future, and of course not all of this will come about absolutely immediately, but we must do the work immediately on it, then we can release resources that would otherwise go into overheads, can go into either more financial support to the companies concerned, or alternatively, the resources we release, the human resources we release, can provide post-investment support. So that's, for me, an example of how necessity and tough environment and reduced budget needs us to work in a much smarter way to achieve similar or even better outcomes. On the funds in distress, I'm sure DG will talk more about that, but the 500 million rand has been resources that the department identified and transferred to these agencies, the IDC, the NEF, and CIFA, to help them with the immediate distress funding, and a big chunk of that has also been to support those entities in their work relating to funding for PPEs, a question that indirectly Honorable Jaco has raised. Turning to Honorable Jaco's question on the PMU, and she asks an interesting question, which is, how do we measure the success of the special economic zones? And what is changing in our approach to this? Now, previously, what the department did, it set a policy framework and a legislative framework. So the legislation dealing with SEZs were introduced via the department to parliament, and that sets the legal framework. And from time to time, the department would then engage at a policy level. But for a number of years, other than that, the department's main work was to assess applications from provinces to set up new SEZs and to provide a funding stream to the existing SEZs. We've become convinced by looking at it that the performance of special economic zones have been extremely uneven. We've had some that have begun to register real successes, though it's taken a long time to get there. And that would be, an example would be the Kucha Industrial Development Zone in the Eastern Cape. That's not the only example, but you also have in KwaZulu-Natal the Dube Trade Port, which has a SEZ component in it. And of course, the East London IDZ. So these were 3 that we saw had better than average performance. There were special economic zones that were introduced in a number of other provinces, from provinces like the Western Cape, like Gauteng, Free State and others, where there were either special economic zones already in place, currently in place, or proposed, where we were not convinced that the speed with which the implementation is taking place was appropriate. I mean, let me take the example of the Richards Bay IDZ in KwaZulu-Natal. It's been around for a long time, and it's not registered an enormous uptake of investment projects. Similarly, the example of the Saldanha IDZ, where again, we haven't had a significant uptake. And there are many, many other examples like that. Now, what do we do as a department when faced with this? To date, the department, or certainly until last year, the department provided advice on request by provinces, but it then began to rethink the strategy. And during the course of last year, we did quite a bit of work to think about where the gap and the challenge is. And in many cases, it was in institutional capacity. We commissioned some fresh thinking on the matter. DG October sat looking at the experience of all of the special economic zones, and he summarized for the ministry what the lessons were from a number of years of implementing special economic zones. And some of them were very obvious and evident things. You needed governance stability. You need to have strong and capable CEOs and technical staff to run the special economic zones. But above all, you needed to have a viable business plan. And a business plan is different to one's hopes. A business plan is something that has gone through a rigorous process of assessing whether what a province or municipality says is the potential is actually so recognized in the market. And I recall last year there was an example of a special economic zone that was proposed by one of the provinces. But as we analyzed it carefully, it became evident that there wasn't going to be a significant investor uptake. And we declined at the time to have that special economic zone proposal accepted. When we work with provinces, we and a number of provinces recognize that there are capacity challenges. So the department worked with the Development Bank of Southern Africa and the IDC to say, can we have a few of your skilled personnel working with provinces to enhance the proposition that is put on the table when a proposal to designate a special economic zone is put to government. Where there are really viable proposals, we need to give less money because the intrinsic value proposition is so strong that we may need to just assist with some top structures and facilitate supplier development and so on. Where the underlying logic of a special economic zone is weak, then the state has to put enormous resources in to try to attract companies to come there. And in a resource-constrained environment where we don't have as much money as we would ideally like to put into special economic zones, we must strengthen the capacity of the existing zones to do better and new zones to have stronger and better articulated business plans. So the idea of bringing together skilled personnel from the IDC and the DBSA is to assist with doing this. I share, Honorable Yako, your concern that we must make sure that we don't have unnecessary agencies and units, because ultimately they consume resources. And so this one is to try to unlock the value that we think we should be getting from the different special economic zones. Moving on to the state-owned company on PPEs. I had, in fact, been provided with a parliamentary question by Honorable Jaco. And the question asked the number of whether, in fact, we have a state-owned company providing PPEs. And I provided a detailed reply. And the reply said that we are doing many different things. On the one hand, we are using state agencies to support the production of PPEs. On the other hand, we're building partnerships with companies in the private sector, including youth-owned enterprises, women-managed enterprises, and others, to build broader capability and to provide economic opportunities to people, to South Africans, to entrepreneurs who want to get into the space. And the example I gave was of the production of face masks and similar products, where on the one hand, we produce these masks directly in companies that are subsidiaries of the IDC, companies like Sheraton and others. During a time when there was a shortage of these fabric face masks, they quickly shifted their production to provide these masks. But we also utilized the resources that the IDC was able to mobilize to support smaller businesses and companies owned by young people and others to get into the mask making business. So we tried to do both. In the production of ventilators, which is a critical medical equipment piece that was needed, we have the CSIR that will now be producing the largest numbers of what are called CPAP machines. It's the machines that are used in hospitals for the flow of oxygen for people who are COVID positive and who have respiratory problems and who are in need of oxygen. In that case, it's a state-owned company doing it. But at the same time, we keep the door open to private players that come in because it's about doing both, Honorable Jaco. It's utilizing the resources of the state where we have capability and at the same time stimulating the opportunities that there are for young South Africans, for women, and more generally for people who are able to contribute. The advantage of doing it that way is that we don't have to raise all the capital, that we're responsible for providing either an incentive or alternatively a portion of the capital by way of loan funding. But the private sector can also utilize the resources that they can access. And if the state had unlimited resources, the state may want to do more, but in circumstances where resources are limited, the state needs to pick fairly carefully where it focuses. There's another part to it, and that is enterprise, that many young people and private sector players bring know-how and capability, and they want to run their own businesses. They don't necessarily want to come and work in the state. And running a PPE plant is not the same as running a government department or a ministry or an agency. They need different skills. They need greater levels of flexibility. If we try to run emergency supplies of PPEs through the Public Finance Management Act, we would have had major challenges. So it's a combination, depending what the agency is, and to set up a whole new agency and a whole new factory, I think would have misdirected our resources. So I think I can say, Honorable Jaco, and I think you would be comforted by the fact that there were state-owned entities that entered the market and played an active role. There were private players that entered the market. At one of the press conferences, I had a group of young people who were involved in PPE manufacture, and they explained to me some of their experiences in this field. On the broader question that you've asked, Honorable Jaco, who benefits from the Black Industrialist Program. I wonder if through, if I may ask the chairperson, if it would be possible to give us an opportunity to make a more detailed presentation shortly after the budget vote of the department on the Black Industrialist Program, where we would be able to more comprehensively respond to the kind of questions that Honorable Jaco has asked. They're good questions. We need to be able to point out who are the beneficiaries of the various programs and what are the demographics of the beneficiaries. And we're doing a piece of work that Honorable Cuthbert will know about, because he had asked a parliamentary question to try to quantify the impact of our program more broadly. And a subsect of that is to look at the Black Industrialist Program. The department is, of course, will be awaiting the full audit, but even if we provide, and it will take us a few weeks to put a proper presentation together, not just a bland list of names, but also what kind of economic activities are they involved in? What do these manufacturers make? And I think that would be a very useful presentation for us to provide to the committee across the platforms of the DTIC, the IDC, and the NEF, so that you can see at one go the full program. I should also indicate that we now make available, as a decision that we've taken at the executive authority level, the names of all the beneficiaries of the different programs for not only the Black Industrialists, but more generally the programs that we have. Which brings me to questions that other honourable members asked. I want to turn to the question Honourable Mulder put. But before doing so, I should say thank you, Honourable Jaco, on the comments on furniture. I agree with you that it shows enormous potential. We do import quite a bit of furniture. Someone was telling me recently that he had begun to kit out his flat, and he had taken a personal decision to try to have as much of the furniture sourced from South African suppliers. And it was a very interesting experience for him to see which kind of furniture is made locally and what is imported. So we need to do more to enhance the value proposition of South African furniture. And part of our conversation would have to be with furniture retailers to get them to actively promote South African-made products. And our periodic calls to South Africans to buy locally made goods will also support this initiative. Honourable Mulder makes a good point, which is that in thinking about the future, we need to see how we manage a decreased budget. And Honourable Mulder suggests that we need to do things differently. And I think a big part of our presentation today was about where we think we can do things differently, but we still need to pursue the same goals. The goals don't change. In fact, some of those goals become even more urgent. How we achieve those goals, we have to constantly learn and become smarter. Any government, anywhere in the world that sits and says, we learn nothing from experience, is a government that will stagnate. So I don't believe that we are not open to doing things differently where it makes sense to do so. But I would say, first I welcome again Honourable Mulder, and you did make this offer previously, and I am going to ask that we prioritize the engagement with yourselves, because we do want to hear the thoughts that you have on how we can achieve the national development goals. And what are those goals? Those goals are to build an economy that is truly resilient, fast-growing, inclusive, in which all South Africans have a strong and active stake, with large numbers of jobs created and opportunities that are available to young people, to women, and to Black South Africans too. Now, Honorable Tring picked up the theme of Honorable Mulder, and I want to see if I could perhaps link the comments together, because I think there are connections between these different points. Honorable Tring makes the comment that race-based policies should go, and that we need to ensure that no one group is singled out as the only ones who receive handouts. Now, I think, Honorable Tring, first, thank you for introducing a necessary and important discussion we need to have. The first thing is that we don't believe that government's role is handout. That, as I indicated earlier, we've moved from a more passive set of incentives through the form of subsidies in the past to a more active form of incentives in which we expect the recipient to bring something significant to the operation. So the old price support systems that there were 30, 40 years ago have been replaced by this more active industrial policy thing where industries are able to get support, but they in turn must deliver on a specific mandate. And at the moment, and this is something that I think we've explained in other fora, but it's important to explain it also in a parliamentary forum. Our policies don't say that only Black South Africans or only women or only young people can access public funds. In fact, if you look at the work of the IDC and the DTIC, and I have to sign off on some of these applications that are made, they don't only go to designated groups. And I think it's important that we clarify that. But we do identify the importance of ensuring that designated groups do get support. And we do so because we have to deal with a range of positives and challenges. Let me deal with the positives. If I look at the shape of the economy today, and I see how few young people are significant entrepreneurs, and I compare that, say, with the United States, where many young people are driving the digital economy, and they've added enormous value. Then I go to our young people and I say, what is the constraint? And they say, when we go to commercial banks, because we don't have a commercial record, we don't have 20 years or 30 years of operation, we don't get the funding that we need. Because they say you don't have a track record. But the only way to get a track record is to be allowed to be on the playing field. So the state then steps in, and in our youth promotion programs, we try to see, can we support young people? Let me take the example of Black South Africans. The vast majority of South Africans are and have historically been described as Black South Africans. But you don't see the same proportions represented in the economy. Now, why is that? Is it because there is a difference in innate capability that some South Africans with one set of pigmentation are more capable to run businesses than other South Africans with a different pigmentation? Absolutely not. And you indicated, Honorable Tring, and I agree with you that we have talents across all South Africans. And yet, if we are all equally talented irrespective of pigmentation, how come the outcomes are so different? And that represents many things, but it represents our sad history. And it's a history that has been forged over many centuries, and it's not going to be undone in less than 30 years. But history is not only about the past. History carries its seeds in the present. If someone's father owns a business and has owned that business for many years and has a very strong relationship with a commercial bank and has many business associates that they meet on the golf course, then that young person, 22 years old, energetic, talented, is able to inherit not just the family business, but all the relationships, and gets introduced in many different ways to what makes a good business ecosystem work. If someone else's family lived in a informal settlement in which the father was a worker in the informal sector, eking out an existence, has not had the opportunity of going to university or even completing matric, and he has a 22-year-old young person who's energetic and talented, he has no business no asset base he can give his young son or daughter for that matter. He's not able to say, okay, now go to the bank and take out a loan and we'll put the company business up as surety to you. He doesn't have that. He doesn't have a dad who is able to say, come with me on Saturday, we're going to go to the golf course. I want to introduce you to someone, a bank manager who really has been a real support to me and I think can be important to you in your business life in future. That dad is not a member of the golf club. And so those are the things that continue today. And our role across all of us, not just government, but the private sector too, is to see how do we combine our efforts to ensure that that 22-year-old young person whose dad is in the informal sector, scraping together a living, is given the kind of support that the young person whose dad has had a more fortunate life history is able to give to him. And it's that reality that we need to confront. But our role as government is to try to encourage both sets of young people, because both of them, if they are successful, will help to create jobs and will add economic value to the country. They will pay taxes to national treasury, which in turn comes back to provide the support that government can give. So I wanted to do that to really make the point that in our programs, both young people can apply. The young person whose dad has a business can apply to government for support, and the young person whose dad does not have a business can also apply. But we do take into account disadvantage, historical disadvantage in our work. And I hope that that helps a little bit. But Honorable Tring, that doesn't mean that we are not open to new ideas about how to get even better impact and outcomes. And so if there are some thoughtful proposals that government has not come across that you think we should give some consideration to it, our door is always open on new ideas to have a better impact and outcome.
Minister?
Chairperson?
I thought because I'm looking at the time, we do have to log in for plenary as well. So what I would actually suggest, maybe for the DG with the questions that have come through, that Monday before close of business, the written responses can be sent through to the committee. And maybe for today's meeting, try and actually wrap up, because we are going to be going to plenary now as connecting. But I think the only item is around program. Our next meeting is on the 15th.
Sorry, Chair, it's Mr. McPherson.
Yeah.
So I just want to just make the point that this is now the second engagement where my questions aren't being answered.
Can I just maybe make that suggestion, Honorable McPherson? Because what I was suggesting is that Monday, end of business 13, we have written responses to the committee of all the questions that have been asked. And I think for now, it's just the timing which I have that we should be actually linking in for plenary. Can I just note your point, Honorable McPherson, because I'm not sure that the minister will deliberately not want to respond to question. If ever, maybe we can have that arrangement which I'm proposing. Our portfolio committee next meeting is on the 15th. If we can be able to actually then pick up from there. But on issues of programming, we would actually have a discussion on our next meeting
So,
and take the
Chair, if I
process
can
forward.
just follow up, please. You know, really, if this is how things are going to be in the future, I might as well just send written questions to the minister and he can reply in writing, because this is not an engagement. This is a one-way discussion, and it's really not fair on members that that we ask questions and then we run out of time and they aren't answered. I will just rather not attend the meetings. I'll rather just put the questions in writing, because it has the same effect.
Well, what we will have to do as well, Macpherson, taking your point, we may actually ask that members ask only 2 questions so that you can have a shorter session and more time for the minister to respond. Can we note your point? And then maybe with the suggestion I'm making to say fewer questions and more engagement with the minister directly might actually be quite useful. Can we note that? And in the suggestion I'm making, if ever we can be able to proceed in my suggestion, but the next time, can we make sure that members will have fewer questions so that minister can answer within the time frame we have in the committee fully to all the questions asked by the members? So I understand that, Macpherson. Can we note that? So can we actually ask the committee to actually, then minister, can we take a minute to try and actually respond to the comment raised by a member? But on my part, I think it will be important that we try and actually conclude, and Monday, close of business, get the written responses to the questions. And I'm sure we're meeting on Wednesday, we can pick up on some of the issues. Thank you. Minister?
Chair, thank you very much. I agree with Honourable Macpherson, Chair, that it would be enormously helpful if there was an opportunity for an engagement of the sort rather than the written replies. So I take your ruling to be that questions that are programmatic, meaning they take a yes or a no, or there's a number, there's a financial figure that must be given, that we should do in writing to save time. But a lot of the questions that have come up are quite important questions, and I would really appreciate if, Chair, there was an opportunity for a follow-up session of the committee where I can deal in detail. These are good questions, all of them without exception, and they deserve a considered reply. I will do my best within the constraints of obviously cabinet meetings and things that can't be shifted around, and I'm in your hands on this. I also want to find out, Chair, whether we have another 10 minutes left, or whether you need to wrap up immediately. If I have another 10 minutes, I can briefly try to touch at least 1 or 2 of the remaining questions, but I'm in your hands, Chairperson.
I will definitely ask that we immediately try and run. Is 3-line whip? Is the plenary starting at 3? And I don't think it will be fair. We might find that then we got locked out, which actually may not be a good thing. So we can round up immediately, Minister, because I think we should actually be able to link to the plenary immediately after our meeting. If you can take a minute, round up, and then we can be able to proceed.
Okay. Now, thank you very much, Chair. So I think in my concluding comment, it would really be to say that many of the questions that came up, and I take it that we will work with the chairperson to find an opportunity where we can engage on the questions that have been asked of a more policy character. In my summary of it, I would like to emphasize that with the new constraints on us, we are going to be stretching ourselves and trying to do things differently. We'll succeed, I hope, on many of it. I have no doubt we are going to learn some difficult lessons. We won't get everything right. And I'm going to ask for the understanding of the committee, because the deputy ministers and myself, as well as the DG, is saying with a expanded set of demands on us, with a reduced set of resources on us, let's tackle a plan ambitiously rather than simply to settle for less. The more detailed questions that have come up, I would like to have an opportunity then, as you've indicated, to do justice to the questions that that the members have asked. I'm tempted to try to slip 1 or 2 replies in, but I know that my chairperson will
Yes.
feel
Yes.
that he is compromising the responsibilities that MPs have to be there for a 3-line whip. So thank you for the opportunity, Chairperson. And I'm sure I speak on behalf of the Deputy Ministers, as well as the DG, and certainly myself, to say we look forward to having the further session as soon as possible of the committee. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Minister, for your flexibility, because I'm sure time will be limited. How much we take on the presentation, the number of questions, I think we may have to manage that much more efficiently, and we can have a more sound and complete discussion. Secretariat, I'm not sure if ever there's any other issue we have to pick up, but I know that our next meeting is the 15th. We're looking at the revised budget vote report, first draft.
That's correct, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay. Can I apologize to members for finishing a bit late? Thanks, Minister, for the input, and DG and the whole of the team ministry. And can we then adjourn our meeting? And thank everyone for the participation. Thank you. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.